Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. We have Eve and Jessie on the line. Charlotte Argue, my colleague, is here with us. We'll be giving a brief introduction to the West Coast Electric fleets, and then the order of presentations is Eve, followed by Jessie.
Hi, welcome everyone, and this is Charlotte Argue. Thanks for joining us for the October West Coast Electric Fleets webinar. This webinar is on Walking the Talk, Local Government Actions on Electric Vehicles in Fleets. This is part of a webinar series that we have been running with West Coast Electric Fleets. I and my colleague Ryan Davis is with the Fraser Basin Council. We're a not-for-profit organization based in British Columbia, and we're one of the outreach partners with West Coast Electric Fleets and are running the webinar series for this year. Now, before we get started, I'm going to pass it back over to Ryan, but I just wanted to go over a few reminders on how the webinar is set up. So right now, all participants are in listen-only mode. So if you do have questions during the webinar, you can type your questions in that sidebar on the control panel. You should see a chat or question box area where you can type them in, and we will get those questions as they come in, and then take the questions at the end of the presentations and at the end of the webinar. So we have, as Ryan mentioned, two speakers today, which we'll introduce, but first I will pass it over to Ryan to give us an overview on the West Coast Electric Fleets program.
Yeah, so West Coast Electric Fleets is a international partnership between British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, and California. It also makes up several municipalities in those jurisdictions with the goal of increasing the number of zero-emission vehicles in public and private fleets. The goal originally had a target of 10% of new procurement by 2016. That goal has now been increased to over 10% by 2020. Here is a list of our current fleet partners. You can see that it stretches from British Columbia all the way down to the southern tip of California. Here is a different breakdown of the mix of those fleets, so you can see that there's a good combination of different levels of government, state, regional, and city, but also private businesses and public utilities as well. So there are 4 current levels for the West Coast Electric Fleet Pledge. We have an on-ramp, highway, express lane, and the new diamond lane level. The diamond lane is for any commitments above 10%. That allows fleets to identify what their commitment level is and also what year they hope to meet that commitment level. It's quite a variety of resources on the West Coast Electric Fleet's website. You can visit our toolkit. It has a resource library, instances of case studies, different profiles of fleets in the West Coast Electric Fleet partners. There's also webinars such as these. There's recordings of previous webinars on that site as well, useful tools, Excel-based calculators, and great information. So please do visit that website if you have not already. Sign the pledge if you're eligible. Take a look at that toolkit, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself or any one of the West Coast Electric Fleet partners.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. So our first presenter today is Eve Howe. Now, Eve has been an air quality and climate change planner for over a decade in Canada and then in the United States. She currently works for Metro Vancouver, which is a regional government in British Columbia, and she's the lead staff person on electric vehicles there. She holds a master's degree in planning and an undergraduate degree in economics, both from the University of British Columbia. So we'll pass it over to you, Eve.
Great, thanks. Thanks for having me. Are you guys able to see my screen okay? Oh, hold on. Is that working out?
Yep, we can see your screen great, Eve.
Okay, great. So yeah, thanks for having me today. I'm happy to talk a bit about what Metro Vancouver is doing with regard to electric vehicles, starting more broadly and then kind of getting more focused towards our fleet and looking at one particular fleet application that might be application of EV that might be somewhat unique. So first of all, who are we? I'm with the Greater Vancouver Regional District, or Metro Vancouver. This is a federation of 23 local authorities in the Vancouver, British Columbia area. This area is home to 2.3 million people. And as a regional district, we provide regional services such as sewage, drinking water, solid waste, regional planning. We have a regional parks network, and as well we're responsible for air quality management, planning and management in our region. So in that role, we also consider climate change. And like many regions, many municipal and local governments, we have a variety of greenhouse gas targets and climate actions and goals. We have on the corporate side a carbon neutral target to be carbon neutral in our corporate operations beginning as of 2012 and continuing from there on. And that the actions that support that target are in our corporate climate action plan. Regionally, we've adopted greenhouse gas reduction targets very similar to what the rest of the province, or identical to the provincial targets of 33% below 2007 levels by 2020 and 80% below 2000 levels by 2050. And to support that, back in 2011, we adopted the Integrated Air Quality and Greenhouse Gas Management Plan. And more recently, our board passed a strategic plan for the years 2015 to 2018, which reinforces its commitment to climate change and the need for an integrated regional climate action strategy. So our motivating factor what drives us to look at electric vehicles are these sort of climate change related goals. Our region is not unlike a lot of regions in that a third of our regional greenhouse gas emissions are related to vehicular transportation and about half of our corporate carbon footprint. So we've been involved in the EV realm for quite some time. Back in 2012, we purchased our first electric fleet vehicles and we launched those on Clean Air Day. Also that same year, we did some regional planning work and outreach work, which led to the installation of 67 public charging stations, primarily funded through private sector and provincial funding sources. And that kind of led to the beginnings of a regional public charging network. So we were involved in that project back in 2012. In 2013, we installed 6 charge points at 3 of our regional parks, and that was kind of our first and so far only, foray into actual providing infrastructure ourselves directly for public use. In 2014, we with our partners launched the Emotive Outreach Campaign, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. This year, we launched evcondo.ca. This is a website on electric vehicle charging in multifamily buildings. That's a pretty key issue and a big barrier in our region. And most recently, in 2016, our board adopted a new fleet planning and acquisition policy to support reductions in corporate greenhouse gas emissions. And I'll focus a bit more on this, as this is primarily a fleet-focused group, and talk a bit about how this policy will be sort of leading us in a certain direction, which we anticipate will mean more EVs in our fleet. So the key thing about number of measures in this policy, but one of the key ones is that we will have a low emissions vehicle standard. And how it'll work is that for each category of vehicles that within our fleet, each size class, we'll establish on an annual basis a more preferred to less preferred list of technologies. So in the case of sedans and SUVs, which is the category we'll be focusing on first, just because there are the most opportunities for low emission vehicles in this category, we'll establish something that looks like this, where for every vehicle we purchase, we will start at the top of the list and move down only if a vehicle on the higher level is unable to meet operational needs, and then with that move down the list. So what it does is it allows us to give preferential treatment to lower emission vehicles through a more structured process. So a little bit about our fleet. We might be smaller than a lot of municipal fleets because we have different sort of purposes. We have 700 vehicles and equipment. We purchase about $1.5 million a year worth of fuel. Like I mentioned, our fleet comprises 50% of our corporate footprint at about 3,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions per year. And as you can see from the pie chart, it's split roughly between heavy equipment and the lighter duty sedans and pickups and vans that we tend to see around town more often. We have 7 electric vehicles, and as I mentioned, we purchased those back in, we purchased 6 of those back in 2012, and at this stage we've only expanded by 1. So these are the vehicles. We have 2 smart electric drives, we have 2 volts, and 2 Ford Transit Connects. And when we purchased those back in 2012, they were very much a pilot program. There was nothing really in our policy at this time that allowed for more of a structured purchase that allowed us to look at these vehicles and prioritize them. So that's where things have changed. So at the time, we were really experimenting with purchasing different types of EVs for different purposes for a variety of uses. The 2-seater smart cars are primarily used in our pool staff pool vehicle to be made available for going to meetings and site visits and such. The 2 Chevy Volts are used for a similar purpose, but for longer range travel. And the Ford Transit Connects were obviously used for cargo. So we wanted to, so as part of that, perhaps continuing along that line of purchasing a mix of EVs for different purposes, we identified a purpose more recently, and that relates to a regional project, which is Emotive, the Electric Vehicle Experience. This campaign, it's an outreach campaign developed by Metro Vancouver and its partners and launched in 2014, is both it's aiming at introducing the public to electric vehicles and the experience of them as something that's fun and exciting and desirable, with that as the focus. So this campaign exists both online, there's a Facebook, Instagram, and website, and in person. That's perhaps the main outreach point for the campaign is attendance at events. So as part of the Emotive campaign, as one of the delivery partners in Emotive, Metro Vancouver invests each year in bringing the campaign and bringing Emotive in the form of a booth, basically, to community events across the region. Last year, or actually this year, this summer, in our region we attended 40 events and talked to thousands of people. Typically how it works is we bring a display vehicle, we bring staff, we bring electric vehicle ambassadors, and these are people who are EV owners in the community who volunteer at our booth. We bring a number of display materials and information, and we basically go to events and talk to members of the community about EVs and answer their questions and introduce them to the concept, or kind of talk them through whatever level of information they're interested in. So as our number of events grew from 2014 to 2015 to 2016, we realized we needed a vehicle of our own to run the campaign with. So we made a business case to our fleet manager and identified specific needs that we'd have for this campaign and for this vehicle. One of our needs was that we needed a vehicle that could travel a reasonable range. The campaign goes across our region, attending events in a variety of municipalities. This map shows the different municipalities we attended, or we had events at this past summer, and the numbers are depicting the number of events we attended. So as you can see, we run across town, traveling up to 130 kilometers in a day. Not exactly sure what that is in mileage. So one of the things we needed was a vehicle with a range that could support this sort of travel. The other need that we had was cargo. So this picture shows all the items that go into the vehicle: 10 by 10 tent weights, chairs, tables, banners, signs, boxes of brochures and swag. We bring a demonstration EV charger with us, and of course our 2 Emotive event staff attend each event at minimum. So we needed a vehicle that could carry all this and yet be fairly easy to move items in and out of. We also wanted the vehicle to also serve as a display vehicle as well. So it was really a dual purpose. We not only needed to move goods and people, we wanted to use that same vehicle to display at our events. So for Emotive, we do try to work with our local dealerships to bring in a variety of vehicles, but that's not always possible to secure one at a certain, on a certain weekend, for example. So oftentimes we were using our own vehicles like this Chevy Volt for display. We wanted a display vehicle that had enough room for branding, and ideally we wanted a vehicle that perhaps didn't look like a typical electric vehicle. We wanted a vehicle that you know, maybe wasn't quite wasn't identified by the public as a you know, recognizable electric vehicle. And ideally we wanted a battery electric, a full EV, full BEV, because we already had the Volt, which we brought to a lot of events. So in response to our request, in July of 2016, we added our 7th electric vehicle to our fleet, which was the Kia Soul EV, or Solly, as we refer to him or her. And this car basically met our needs, both from a cargo capacity standpoint. I think with the rear seats folded down, it can fit 1,400 liters of cargo capacity. Basically, that fits all of that gear and still allows us to see through the rear windshield, which is nice. The Kia Soul also has a very respectable range of about just under 150 kilometers, which is more than adequate to cover our typical driving distances. We did opt for the upgrade to the DC fast charge port, and truth be told, there have been a few circumstances where this has come in handy. How it works is the vehicle is assigned to the Emotive campaign throughout the summer on the weekends. So typically we will have it allocated to us from Friday through to Monday. And the rest of the time we leave it to our in our head office as a pool car for our staff. And there were certainly a couple of instances where we picked up the car on Friday and it had been returned late, or it had actually traveled quite a distance to one of our further out parks and came back with very little charge left on it. So luckily we have a DC fast charger within 5 kilometers of us, and we're able to go top up using our convenient DC fast charge port. And then finally, with its more generous size, the Kia Soul was the perfect vehicle to show our branding off in. I should have showed the back. There's also some branding on the back that shows our website URL, Facebook, and Instagram. So that's been our experience with our small EV fleet to date. We expect that with our new fleet policy that we'll be looking at purchasing more plug-in electric vehicles, and we expect to still be looking at a variety of vehicles based on the variety of needs within our business. And I'm happy to answer any questions people might have, I suppose, at the end of both presentations. Thank you.
We will take 1 or 2 questions now, and then we'll come back to questions after Jessie's presentation as well. So I do have a question that's come in, Eve, which is what low emission vehicles are available in the SUV class? And this is in relation to your low emissions vehicle standard.
Yeah, am I still unmuted? You can hear me?
Hear you.
Okay, great. You know, right now, to date, and you're talking about plug-in electric vehicles. I believe the Mitsubishi Outlander is the only one that should be arriving shortly, if it hasn't arrived already, in Canada. We include as part of our pyramid other low-emission vehicles, such as hybrids. So I think we've secured our first RAV4 hybrid, which is an SUV. We're definitely looking at that category, and as well the pickup. Light pickups as a big opportunity. I think once those vehicles become available in plug-in versions, that'll open up a lot more opportunities in our organization to switch out to electric.
Great. And a related question here regarding, again, the low emission vehicle standard. Do you use standardized lists, or how is the list selected in terms of the vehicles that are considered?
That's a very good question. I think how, and we're still developing our very first one since this was just recently passed, we're not able to identify specific makes and models. So I think what we'll do is we'll have a sort of a technology preference that's informed by some market research on what are the types of vehicles out there and what are their capacities and such. While we can't actually assign specific vehicles as preferred, just because in terms of our procurement policies we have to open it up to tender, we can have the specifications informed by market research about what currently is out there. I don't know if that is clear, if that answers the question.
Yeah, no, that's great. I did have a question regarding sharing this presentation, so just to let everyone know that we are recording this webinar, and it will be on the westcoastelectricfleets.com website. There's a webinar section with all of our previous recordings, so this one will be put up within the next day or two. So as I don't see any questions at this moment, but again, if you want to ask a question, go ahead and type it into the question bar on the control panel. And in the meantime, we'll move over to our second presenter. So thanks very much, Eve, and hopefully you can stick around in case there's questions at the end. So Jessie Denver is the Energy Program Manager for the San Francisco Department of the Environment, where she leads a diverse team working on energy efficiency, renewable energy, and zero-emission vehicle programs. She has 20 years of experience developing energy policies and programs, and she holds a master's degree in environment and community planning from Antioch University and a bachelor's degree in environmental studies with minors in appropriate technology and environmental ethics from Humboldt State University. So Jessie, we're passed it over to you, so if you can open up your presentation, you can take it away.
Okay, I shared my screen with you, but I don't see the webinar.
Yeah, we're not seeing the presentation itself. You must be in dual mode.
I just have like my main screen. Earlier when we looked at it and it worked, and do you need me to open the presentation that I sent you, or do you already have?
Yeah, open up your own presentation, yeah.
Oh, that wasn't clear. Okay, let me grab that quickly. Sorry about that, everyone. You can see our organization here. All right. There you are. Does that work?
Yeah, we're just going to reshare with the screen. We took it away from you while you were setting it up.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, yeah, we're good.
All right, we're good. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for inviting San Francisco to be a part of this conversation. We're always happy to exchange knowledge with other colleagues in local governments to figure out how we all achieve our climate action goals. So I'm going to tell you a bit about San Francisco's climate action goals and how we communicate those, talk about what we're doing in our own municipal facilities and fleet, and then expand that a bit to how we look at fleets in the private sector, and then move on to some near-term grants that we have that we're working on around zero-emission vehicles. So in 2008, San Francisco's Board of Supervisors endorsed a goal of an 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from 1990 levels by 2050 and a greenhouse gas-free electricity system by 2030. So that's a pretty complex way of describing our goals. And when the mayor goes to places like the Vatican to explain our climate action goals, it's a lot to talk about. So we helped reframe our goals in this way. 0, 5100 routes. So zero waste. 50% of all trips in San Francisco done by sustainable modes of transportation. So this is transportation demand management, getting people onto public transportation, out of single occupancy vehicles, walking, biking, etc. And we've already exceeded this goal. We're at 54% currently, so we're figuring out what that number should be. And then as I noted, 100% renewable energy from our electricity supply. And that's really what's codified, but the way we've been talking about the 100 goal recently is also including transportation fuels and heating fuels in our built environment. So looking at thermal decarbonization and how we start to move away from natural gas for heating and hot water heating. So the roots part of this is then carbon sequestration and how we work on increasing trees in San Francisco, how we work with universities and other stakeholders throughout the region on pilot programs that look at carbon sequestration in soils and rangeland, and using our compost from our zero waste goals to be integrated into that. So there's some really innovative stuff that my colleagues working on our waste management goals are engaged in. So this is how we talk about our goals. Transportation is 43% of San Francisco's greenhouse gas footprint. So quite significant, but only 3% of that is our public transportation footprint. So unlike other local governments that have public transportation and buses that they're trying to figure out how they decarbonize, San Francisco is really fortunate in that our own municipal footprint is not the big piece of that pie. It's really the private sector and looking at light and medium duty vehicles in the private sector. So why is it that our municipal footprint is only 3% of that 43% greenhouse gas footprint related to transportation? It's because we've really been able to prioritize decarbonization of electricity supply. And we're very fortunate that for nearly 100 years, the city's been generating and delivering clean, greenhouse gas-free HECI power from our hydroelectric system. The San Francisco Public Utilities Commission manages this system, and it provides about 17% of the electricity demand in the city. The San Francisco Public Utilities Commission's hydroelectric system customers, their customers include all of our city buildings, including City Hall, San Francisco International Airport, major redevelopment projects, all public housing projects, and our public transportation system. So today we have a public transportation system that includes over 500 trolleys, streetcars, electric buses that are all powered by 100% renewables. In San Francisco, we also have an investor-owned utility that serves the rest of the community, or 73% of the load. So this is most private sector commercial businesses, residents, all things that are not tied to our municipal operations. And they're well on their way to achieving the state's renewable portfolio standards. So today, between San Francisco Public Utility Commission, hydroelectricity, and Pacific Gas and Electric portfolio, our combined portfolio is 40% renewable. So achieving that 100% renewable goal by 2030 is something that we are definitely aggressively working on in partnership with both of our utilities. All right, so let's look at what our municipal fleet looks like. San Francisco Department of the Environment, we are not directly responsible for our municipal fleet. We have an amazing group of colleagues that work in our city administrator's office, and they manage our municipal fleet. and the operation and integration of zero-emission vehicles, low-carbon and efficient vehicles into that fleet. We have an ordinance in San Francisco called the Healthy Air and Clean Transportation Ordinance, and it's embedded in San Francisco's Environment Code. And within our own municipal operations, it prioritizes ensuring that employees, when they need to get to meetings or to conduct business, if they're able to use the public transportation system, transit first, that they do so, and that all the various departments are incentivizing and providing resources for employees to do that. It also prioritizes for our city administrator's office the need to track how vehicles are being used, and they've done a great job of deploying telematics throughout our fleet to collect data to understand where vehicles are being underutilized, prioritizing retirement of vehicles so that we're actually reducing the size of our fleet and then integrating low-carbon vehicles into that. So today our fleet has over 5,200 vehicles, and that's excluding all of the public transportation vehicles that I just noted. This also means that plug-in electric vehicles that we integrate into our fleet, that those are also powered by 100% renewable energy. So to date, we have 46 battery electric vehicles and 15 plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. We have over 600 hybrids and about 450 CNG vehicles. We committed last year to the West Coast Electric Fleet Initiative, along with Vancouver, Portland, Seattle, and Los Angeles, a 10% annual procurement goal of electric vehicles in our fleet, which we are, of course, meeting. And a good timing to be sharing this information with you is that our Board of Supervisors has called a hearing in November asking the question, how do we get to 100% annual procurement of light-duty electric vehicles for our fleet by 2020? So we are helping the city administrator explore what that looks like and preparing for that hearing, which will likely result in an increased goal from the city of San Francisco around annual procurement of electric vehicles. We're also working with our West Coast colleagues through that same initiative, the West Coast Electric Fleet Initiative. When our mayors all made that 10% annual commitment, we also said, okay, we're going to issue a request for information to OEMs. And so this spring we got together down in Long Beach, had a closed-door meeting with automobile manufacturers to say, hey, collectively, this is what our fleets look like with regards to size, and here are some of our immediate needs. And everybody knows the top priority is a light-duty pickup truck that needs to plug in. And so they said, well, issue the RFI. You seem to have enough demand, and especially if you guys are going to open this up and integrate other larger fleets into this initiative, one of us is going to manufacture that truck for you. So that's really exciting, and certainly shows how together we are stronger as local governments and how we can start to strategically move the market. So that RFI is planned to be issued sometime around the end of this month and into next month. Los Angeles is leading the effort, so we'll of course keep everyone updated. I just wanted to note quickly as well that in our fleet we've also integrated renewable diesel into all of our diesel equipment, including buses that don't have overhead electric lines. And renewable diesel has cut the city's greenhouse gas footprint tied to our diesel footprint by 50%. So renewable diesel, of course, is different from biodiesel in the way that it's processed. Because it's hydrogenated, renewable diesel doesn't include oxygen, so it doesn't encounter some of the problems that biodiesel presents relating to freezing temperatures and storage. And because it's the same chemically, it has a similar chemical structure as petroleum diesel, we found that renewable diesel has worked really well in all of our engines, and we haven't had to blend it at all. So we're running 100% renewable diesel. When we integrated this December of last year, other cities around the Bay Area followed suit, and so did the state of California. All right. So on charging infrastructure, of course, if we increase our annual fleet procurement goals, that also means that we need to do a really strategic, in-depth analysis of our municipal facilities to understand where those vehicles will be located, how those vehicles will be used, match the use case scenario of the vehicles to the appropriate charging levels, and assess capacity at each of those municipal facilities to understand what kind of upgrades could be required and do an in-depth cost assessment around that. So those are things that we're also thinking about. But to date, throughout San Francisco has top ranking in the nation for charger availability on a per capita basis. There's over 600 charging stations throughout the city, almost 500 of which are publicly available. At city facilities, there are 130 electric vehicle charging stations, and 113 of those are publicly accessible. We are introducing in December an EV readiness ordinance that will apply to all new construction and major renovation in the city. And what this ordinance will say to developers is that 100% of the planned parking spaces in their project needs to be EV ready. So the plans need to show how conduit could be easily run to those parking spaces to accommodate electric vehicle charging, and that actual conduit needs to be run to the parking spaces that would be hardest to reach. And that they need to be able to have the electrical capacity that supports that charging, and ensure that that electrical capacity through a managed charging system can handle 20% of those spaces being charged at one time. So we're really excited about this. What we're doing with this policy is not mandating that actual charging infrastructure is installed at new developments, but we're managing for future costs. So ensuring that the parking spaces are ready to go as the market begins to transform. And we also hope that in launching this ordinance and rolling it out, that we actually help drive the market, because if we've already made it easy for people to integrate charging into their projects, then the consumers will follow suit. So as was noted in my introduction, my energy team is quite diverse, and we've strategically organized the energy team to align with the state's definition of distributed energy resources. The state of California currently is looking at how to reinvent the utility business model by not looking at energy topics anymore in silos, but how they all work together. So how does energy efficiency with renewables and battery storage work with zero-emission vehicles, and how can we ensure that the amount of renewables that are on the grid midday, every day, because of the state of California's renewable portfolio standard requirements, is being utilized to charge those vehicles rather than creating unnecessary strain on the utility grid. How can zero-emission vehicles provide those ancillary services to the grid, and how can we help create new business models that help drive the marketplace for zero-emission vehicles? So really, my team should be called the Distributed Energy Resources Team, but it's kind of a mouthful. So we're just the energy team. The City of San Francisco, as you may have heard, was one of the 7 nationwide finalists for a U.S. Department of Transportation grant this spring called the Smart City Challenge. This was a $50 million grant. We were the only city in California that was a finalist, and so our vision for electric vehicles in the private sector is called the SECA vision, shared, electric, connected, and autonomous. And it's in that order on purpose. Again, we really want to get people out of single occupancy vehicles. We want them to be a part of the shared economy. We want to electrify the shared economy and help connect people to the options that are available, whether it's public transportation or it's shared rides. And having the SEC in place will provide the base for supporting autonomous vehicles in the future. Without the first 3 letters there, you're not going to be able to have deployment of those autonomous vehicles that everyone's so excited about. So we didn't win that grant, but what that grant did was really create a strategic direction for us. And some of our priorities include creating a grid integration roadmap with our utilities and other stakeholders like transportation network companies, so think Uber and Lyft, so that as we think about deploying charging infrastructure throughout the city, we are looking at where is the demand for electric vehicle charging, where are transportation network companies going, where do they need to see deployment of charging, and overlaying that with a look at the grid and where the utility has opportunities and constraints. So we want to strategically look at how we deploy that infrastructure. And just so that everybody knows, we are ground central for TNC activity. There are almost 40,000 business licenses that have been given out in San Francisco to transportation network company drivers. So that gives you a sense. There are potentially 36,000 vehicles that are operating in San Francisco right now just in the shared economy. So when we look at what are our priorities for electrification of those vehicles, we're really focused on developing partnerships with those companies to figure that out. We're also really interested in creating solutions for multi-unit dwellings, similar to what's already been discussed, and how we can really bring some innovative business models together that pair solar with electric vehicle charging and and energy storage. In California, our independent system operator that kind of is air traffic control for the grid, they deployed a new mechanism by which third-party aggregators who have energy storage systems can aggregate 500 kilowatts of demand and sell it into CalISO's wholesale market and become energy providers to the grid. So again, this really creates the opportunity to partner with the private sector to figure out how we help them create these new business models that create new revenue streams that also result in market transformation for zero-emission vehicles. So ultimately, the Smart City Challenge, we didn't get it, but what it did for us was helped us establish new partnerships with the other finalists. So we've all collectively worked together to submit a Department of Energy grant application. We also have been working with our Pacific Coast Collaborative partners, Vancouver, Seattle, Portland, Los Angeles, to figure out how we start to prioritize what we need to get done around transportation electrification, and rather than competing against each other for grants, how we start to work together to draft grant proposals and proactively shop them around to funders. So this experience for us was really great. My last slide, and I'll just quickly note, is that we're not only looking at electric vehicles from the sense of electricity that powers them, we're also looking at electric vehicles in California that includes hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. So the state of California has a goal of 1.5 million zero-emission vehicles deployed by 2025, and that includes battery electric vehicles and fuel cell electric vehicles. So again, we've aligned what San Francisco's strategy looks like with the state so that we can assure that we're always prepared for funding when that comes down the line. So we've received a grant from the California Energy Commission as well as the Department of Energy to streamline permitting processes for hydrogen fueling stations at existing gas stations, to provide training to first responders and to permitting officials throughout the Bay Area, and also to launch a general consumer awareness and outreach campaign that helps to generate some demand for hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. This year there will be 16 hydrogen stations opening in the Bay Area, and San Francisco is slated for 2. So there's some outstanding grant proposals in the hopper that we should know more about in December, where private sector developers have applied for money to deploy those filling stations here in the city. So that's really exciting, and we're happy to keep you posted. So that wraps up my part of the presentation. Happy to answer questions that folks might have.
Great, thanks very much, Jessie. So again, anyone who has questions, you can go ahead and type those in, and we do have a few questions to go through here. So the first question is regarding your charging stations at your facilities. So you mentioned that you had 130 charging stations at the facility, with 113 also accessible to the public. The question around this is whether or not these stations are shared between your fleet vehicles and the public, and if so, how is that managed, or do you have dedicated stations for your fleet vehicles?
There are some that have dedicated, In some of the parking garages and in our lots, we definitely see some crossover there, but as I mentioned, 130, 113 of which are publicly accessible, so we do have some crossover. I don't have anecdotal information as to whether this has caused any problems for any of our departments. I don't think that it necessarily has. For example, out in front of City Hall, we have electric vehicle chargers that are available both for a city fleet vehicle and for the general public. But the garage also has some chargers too, so if the street chargers weren't available, then there are additional options. Moving forward and looking at how we deploy a significant amount of charging to meet what could be an increased fleet procurement goal, we'll definitely be assessing that more carefully than has been done in the past. This is like a whole new day with regards to what's been done before compared to how we need to move forward. And so we'll certainly be looking at that more carefully, because another element of this is at municipal facilities, like parking garages and lots that the city owns, the publicly available charging, there is no fee for use of that. And that's been a policy to be able to drive adoption, but as we see the market taking off on its own and that incentive not necessarily needing to be there, and also needing to be able to manage charging behavior at municipal facilities, encouraging people not to sit on the charger all day, but really enabling turnover. We need to figure out how we can start to charge folks for that use of the equipment at municipal facilities. But moving forward, I think, even though we are looking at how we double publicly accessible charging at municipal facilities, is how do we also engage the private sector to deploy charging throughout the rest of the private sector, but so that people don't have to only rely on public sector charging stations at municipal facilities, so that those can really be dedicated to our fleet in a more significant way.
Great, thanks for that answer. Another question for you, Jessie. This is regarding procurement decisions for your fleet. So what is really leading those decisions? Is it based on the higher level commitments that have been made, or is there also a business case component to deciding which vehicle gets replaced with which fuel?
Sure, yeah. Moving forward, and I think a lot of what comes out of the EV hearing that's pending in mid-November will, I think, result in us looking at more carefully the business case around deployment of plug-in electric vehicles, especially as the cost has come down, and also how we can potentially start to develop shared pools of EVs rather than departments having individual single occupancy vehicles, and establishing a business case around that. I know our city administrator's office is very, very interested in that deployment of shared pools of is a number of cities. I mean, the goal is to reduce the number of vehicles that you have out the gate, right? Instead of just replacing an ICE vehicle for an electric vehicle just to have another electric vehicle. We'll also be looking at how you acquire those vehicles rather than purchasing them, potentially opening the door to leasing vehicles, which we've seen other cities like our colleagues in Los Angeles do recently with their deployment of the I3 for their police fleet. And looking at total cost of ownership in addition to, what is that upfront first cost, and comparing those two elements to each other to make that business case. Our Healthy Air and Clean Transportation Ordinance really drives procurement to date in looking at how we can procure the lowest carbon intensity fuel at the most cost-effective way, and how we prioritize alternative fuel vehicles. And to date, that definition has included traditional hybrid vehicles and CNG. So that's why we have such a large number of those vehicles, and we're really trying to figure out how we incorporate more plug-in vehicles into that mix. Because between hybrids and CNG vehicles, again, we have over 1,000 units. So we've definitely prioritized efficient, low-carbon vehicles. And now that the market for electric vehicles is really expanding and cost is coming down, we're figuring out how do we increase our procurement goals around that, and we do that based on the business model that justifies that.
Thank you. So we have one last question, and this is for Eve. Does Metro Vancouver have specific targets for the percentage of the fleet that will become electric?
No, not at this point. So we did sign on to the West Coast Electric Fleet Pledge as an on-ramp partner. And since we just signed on just a couple of months ago, what we wanted to do is give ourselves a bit more time before we set specific targets if we are to. I think how it's going to work is that for each class of vehicle, we will evaluate every single one. So, the way that standard works is that every single vehicle we purchase, say within sedans and SUVs, we'll look at potentially getting battery electric first. So it all depends on our user needs and how many of those we can keep at the top of our preferred list and how many drop down. So I think after we get some experience in buying under this protocol, we'll be able to get a sense of whether or not, what's a realistic target for us based on our operations and based on what the market has.
Great. There's another question that's come in for Jessie. Does your fleet have any experiences with BYD vehicles? I understand that they have a wide variety of vehicles, including buses with much faster charge time than other EV manufacturers.
So we haven't integrated, we are familiar with BYD, we are familiar with their buses, we're familiar with Proterra buses, and we have not looked at procuring those buses to date. Again, our buses already a significant number of them already run on electricity. We have the overhead lines that are powered by renewable energy. And the buses that we do have that are still diesel run on 100% renewable diesel, and by 2019 the remaining diesel fleet will be replaced with hybrid buses, which will, on the fuel side of things, be powered by renewable diesel. So we haven't integrated electric buses in the format that the questions being asked, because it isn't a priority for us yet. We also, San Francisco, as some of you who have visited us know, we are a land of significant hills, and we are also a place where there's significant ridership on our buses. So we have some hills, for example, that have 30% gradient hills, and when you have 80 people on a bus, the current technology is a little iffy as to whether they're going to actually be able to get up all 3 of those hills in a row with the high number of riders that we have. So again, I think that not one size fits all for solutions, but we do know that our colleagues in other cities around the Bay Area that don't have such diverse topography as we do, and don't have access to renewable energy in the way that we do, are looking at those companies and those technologies.
Thanks. Okay, well that concludes the questions for today, and we're just about at time here. So just thank you once again to both of our speakers today in Denver. Again, this webinar is being recorded, so you will have access to it afterwards on westcoastelectricfleets.com, and please feel free to contact us through there as well if you have any follow-up questions. Just to let everyone know, we do have another webinar that's lined up for November 17th, so there will be an invite that comes out in the next week or so, so keep an eye out for that. It's again featuring a couple of local governments, but focusing more on the business case aspect of fleet procurement. So with that, thanks everyone, have a great day, and we'll talk to you in about a month.